Howdy, it's Jimmerado, and this is September 2021. We're on our mostly Vermont road trip, and we are in the ridiculously perfect town of Manchester, Vermont. And we're actually driving to Hildene, which was pretty much the summer home of Abraham Lincoln's surviving son, the one son that really made it to adulthood and and lived. His other three sons pretty much died at young ages, and but Robert Todd Lincoln lived a nice full life and accomplished quite a bit on his own. And he built this basically summer home up in Vermont. And we stopped by to check things out on this particular day. There's a goat farm, and then there's also a train that you can walk to because Robert Todd Lincoln really established a heck of a career working for the Pullman car company, and yeah, he made a lot of money. He did very well for himself. Yeah, he lived here for quite a while, and then two or three more generations of the family lived here up until 1975. I did not know this. I know quite a bit about Abe Lincoln, but I was not aware that the last direct descendant of Abraham Lincoln died in 1985. Just a little bit of trivia I picked up here that I was unaware of. But yeah, we're driving the fairly long driveway up to the main house. A nice little staff work in here. We talked to several people that were just wonderful. And we were in Vermont back in 2016, and I really wanted to make it here on that trip. But we were mostly kind of in northern and central Vermont. This is kind of, I guess you would sort of say maybe southwestern Vermont. And we just couldn't make it here. And there were several things I wanted to do in this city and right here, and visit Hildene. And I knew I would want at least a few days in this area. So we decided in 2016 to save this visit for another year. So here in 2021, we did that. And these are mostly just little random clips of video I made here and there. There's kind of a picture of the front of Hildene, kind of as you come up upon it. They don't allow video on the house tour, so I didn't really video, but I did take a lot of pictures, and I'll show you some of the stuff we took pictures of. There was kind of the great, they weren't doing formal tours with COVID going on and all, but this young lady kind of did a little talk before we went in, and that was great. And they have this great pipe organ that's kind of built up through the house, and they play it quite a bit, and it sounds wonderful. There's kind of, I guess you would say, the main living room area, and I can just imagine Robert Todd Lincoln greeting guests and saying hello to people as they came in. I'll put up some other videos about this, but there is a resort nearby that Robert and I know at least one of his brothers and Mary Todd Lincoln visited while Abraham Lincoln was still president, and they liked it a whole lot, and they got to where they would come up frequently, and they would stay at the Equinox Hotel Resort. And they liked it quite a bit. I know Mary Todd Lincoln would come back, and so would Robert. Again, Robert loved the area so much he ended up building this house. Abraham Lincoln was supposed to come up and enjoy the Equinox with his family, but he was assassinated, and that never happened. But there were lots of preparations made for his visit that ended up just simply not happening, which is, very tragic, of course. We did stay at the 1811 house, which was lived in for 2 decades by one of Abraham Lincoln's granddaughters, and that was a real treat for me. I really enjoyed that. I'll put another video up about that, about the 1811 house. I'll also put up another video about the Equinox, just because I loved both of those places, and it was a thrill getting to walk through both. The Equinox was just a lovely, lovely resort, and they there's a great painting of Robert Todd Lincoln. One of the people at the front desk at the Equinox gave me a book as I was talking to him about history. He went and got a nice book that he just gave to me, which I thought was just very generous and nice. Manchester's a great town. One of the guides here at Hildene somewhat joked, that the 1% lives in Manchester, and Robert Todd Lincoln would have definitely been among that group. A little bit of irony about how wealthy he became and how selfless and humble, his father was. I do believe Robert Todd Lincoln was a very good person. I think he was a good, decent, giving, innovative person. I don't think of him as a selfish, miser type. I think he did a lot of good on his own, and really established himself as his own person. As he worked hard to do, he really tried to become Robert Todd Lincoln and not Abraham Lincoln's son. Anyway, you can look that up and read on that elsewhere. But I could go on and on about that. I have a lot of admiration for Robert Todd Lincoln. I was listening to a podcast the other day, a New England podcast, and the hosts brought up Hildene. By the way, there is an actual hat worn by Abraham Lincoln, one of, I believe, only two known to exist. The Smithsonian owns the other, and if you keep up on these things, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library thought they may have had one. That's a discussion for another day. And of course, you have the masks, the death masks of Abe Lincoln. I see those in about every museum, and of course, a playbill from Our American Cousin, the play that was showing at Ford's Theater the night Abe Lincoln was assassinated. And we're back. We're outside of the house. A lovely house, and it was lived in by the family up until 1975. Look at that. Yeah, that's some incredible scenery. Great garden out here. This is just a beautiful place in its own right, even if you're not interested in Lincoln. Oh, I mentioned earlier I was listening to a podcast, a New England podcast, and the hosts brought up Hildene, and they were unaware of if Abraham and Mary had any children. They didn't know. They were unaware of the descendants of Abraham Lincoln. They also were unaware of whether or not Mary Todd Lincoln got remarried after Abraham Lincoln's death. I think they were younger, so I'll excuse them. But, maybe the fact that I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and I know a lot about Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln, I just assumed everybody knew the basics of Honest Abe's life. Look at that. That's just ridiculous how pretty that is. I'm sorry, I'll try not to get distracted by the video, but this is just something special to look at. I did pick up, I want to say real quickly, and I'll mention this in my other videos too, I picked up a book, a nice signed copy of Four Marys and a Jessie, The Story of the Lincoln Women by C.J. King. An incredible book. Oh, and there's a little kind of observatory thing that Robert Todd Lincoln had going on. That's pretty impressive. But yeah, I picked up Four Marys and a Jessie, The Story of the Lincoln Women by C.J. King. And I feel like the title is a bit misleading. It's more than just the story of the Lincoln women. It basically tells the whole story of the Lincoln family, obviously with an emphasis on stuff you wouldn't know about, Robert Todd Lincoln, his family, their children, and it kind of gives a nice family history of all of Abraham Lincoln's descendants. Just a great book, and it was a fun read, hearing about the generally eccentric ladies that descended from Abraham Lincoln. Really interesting stuff. In fact, while we were touring Hildene, one of the men kind of keeping up with us for a while, he had known one of Abraham Lincoln's granddaughters. She flew planes and was just eccentric, very likable. He said she was very nice, very generous, just a very nice lady. But he had known her through some professional channels, and I thought that was neat. Getting to hear that kind of gave me goosebumps. Yeah, and after you tour the home, there's some nice walking trails on the property, and you can walk down to this Pullman car. And they had a couple of nice fellows there that would tell you all about it. And there was some stuff to read. You couldn't go in, but you could kind of look in the windows and check things out. And trains are always just a lot of fun to look at and to read up on. And yeah, Robert Todd Lincoln was a pretty big deal with Pullman. Made a lot of money. Yeah, there were some, again, kind of markers to read and information here. They were a bit critical of him, talking about how, he could have championed for better wages for the workers. Sure he could have. I didn't know if that criticism was necessary or not. What do you think? Again, it's, I don't want to get into any political discussions or discussions about political correctness or anything, but I think Robert Todd Lincoln accomplished a lot and found himself in some really interesting situations. And, sure, you can look at anybody's background and find stuff to nitpick about. I just don't think the Lincolns are the family that you can get too critical of. And that's just me. Let me know if you disagree, though. Another interesting fact about Robert Todd Lincoln. So, Robert Todd Lincoln was present for the death of basically 3 presidents. He was around and connected to, counting his dad's, 3 presidential assassinations. And I think he became a bit superstitious in his own right about that. I think he was, kind of viewed himself as a bit of an albatross for presidents. And of course there was always a suggestion that maybe he should run for president. And, I think he just ran like his life depended from those suggestions. But yeah, he was president for William McKinley and James Garfield. He was around when things went south for them. Just an interesting character, again, in his own right. He's a man that lived an extremely interesting life. An exceptionally interesting life. However, he was Abraham Lincoln's son, and you absolutely can't get away from that. In fact, there's a historic marker when you pull into Hildene. And it doesn't say, home of Robert Todd Lincoln. It says home of the Civil War president's son. And it's just absolutely impossible for him to ever have gotten away from that. And the same for his grandchildren and his children. That's the book I mentioned earlier talks about how a lot of those descendants basically said, yeah, we were the grandkids of Abraham Lincoln, but we never met him. So just something to ponder. Wonderful goat farm here too, by the way. We actually bought some goat cheese and we snacked on that in our room, and that was just a wonderful treat. I love goats. I grew up on a farm. My dad always had goats. Probably my second favorite animal after chihuahuas. Goats absolutely have a sense of humor. They are funny. Yeah, I love goats. Wonderful animals. They will take their little heads and butt you and then look at you as if to say, what are you going to do about it? And they're just fun, funny animals. And fun to watch, as you can see right there. And they set up the goat farm later on, I kind of think, to help sustain Hildene. And yeah, in the gift shop they do sell various goat and goat-made products. You'll actually see there's kind of a little factory set up after we look at the goats, where you can see them making the soap and cheese and that sort of thing. And these are some bigger goats. These are yeah, these are bigger than what my dad ever had, but they are just great, and they're very sweet too. They'll come over. They're very affectionate, and just sweet animals. And a nice lady here is about to tell us a little bit about them.
So don't forget they can bite and spit. Howdy, how are you?
Hi. This is our milking herd.
Oh,
We're milking 22 right now, and then the rest of the ladies in here are retirees.
oh,
Let's see. They had 44 babies this year altogether. You saw some of them out there. And we milk twice a day. And then with that milk, we make cheese. We do 3 different kinds of goat cheese. And then we also do cow's milk cheeses during the winter time when the girls are pregnant.
then you sell the cheese up at the gift shop?
Yes.
Oh, okie dokie. We'll have to get some for sure.
And she was a really nice lady. We actually talked to her a little bit more. She was doing some work on a tractor, and she got off the tractor and came in to talk to us when she saw us come in and look at the goats. I thought that was just great. If you lived in Vermont, this would be like the perfect field trip for a school group. And there you see some of the people there working on the cheese and making goat-related products. And they did sell this at the gift shop. They have a great gift shop at Hildene. I dropped a little more coin there than I should have, but as I mentioned, I bought the book about the Lincoln family. I bought another book on just Hildene itself, and we bought some goat cheese. Just a nice place to stop and pick things up. Of course, they had all sorts of Abraham Lincoln stuff too, and there's some goats eating.